budget for fiscal year 24-25. And obviously, council's aware, during the whole year, you've had budget meetings pretty much on pieces of the budget, so our process pretty much goes the entire half year of the calendar year. And then we'll start it over again when you're finished. But nonetheless, you're pretty well apprised of everything that's going to be presented. So Victoria, Assistant City Manager, will make the presentation. She has led the budget team, including Dave Felix and Jen Osborne, and of course, the balanced budget wouldn't have been possible without the support and help of the departments and department heads as well. So I'd like to thank them for all their efforts to get us to this point. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Victoria then.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'd also like to thank Jen and David for their help and support. Could not ask for a better budget team. And all of you too. You also helped a lot.
Well, it had something to do with it, I think.
A little bit. There we go. All right, so as Chuck said, we're going to go over all of the changes to date from the tentative budget book and then go through everything else pertaining to the budget: revenue, debt, O&M, personnel, capital, our future issues, which haven't changed from last time, and then, of course, we'll wrap up with our next steps in the budget process, which are, the list is getting much shorter at this point. All right, so our general fund changes from our last presentation. Jen found a double entry in IT software. So the nearest fire reporting system is a new fire reporting software system that our fire department's going to. So Jen removed that double entry. The cost of it was a little higher than we thought it would, so there's a small $6,002 increase. Because of that double entry, we also restored the $27,000 cut to IT office equipment maintenance. As you are also well aware, we added the 2% market shift in January for both full-time and part-time staff for a total of $288,559. And then Jen recalculated all of the allocations. So if you recall, back when she did the personnel presentation part of the budget series, we had to use estimated allocations for that one, as well as estimated personnel numbers based off of last year. So she went back, and now we have the actual allocation and the actual personnel numbers. So those numbers changed because of that. Also because of that, fitting in the additional raise for staff, we had talked at that point about needing to do some changes to our capital improvement fund. We'd decreased the Roadrunner Park project by $500,000 and moved the fire station parking lot and bay door projects into capital because of the differences in the estimates for allocation and personnel. They were higher than they ended up being, the actual numbers. So that total amount ended up being, that we had to decrease, ended up being less. So $235,550 will be transferred in from the capital improvement fund to cover those projects, which also means that the Roadrunner Park project will end up just over $700,000. You'll have that actual number later in the presentation.
Excuse me. Is the amount we have in the tentative budget for Nearest? Okay. The 42.5, is that, should that be 30? Is that including something else? Because it only has that item as at 42.5, but we only are removing 35,000 for a double entry, so I'm confused how that works. Oh, thank you.
So Munis had two entries for the NERS system, one for $35,000, one for $42,500. Then we found out the estimate should really be $48,502. So I removed the $35,000 and then upped it to the $48,502.
Okay.
Which happened after the tentative budget book was printed?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. when you said double, I was just thinking it'd be the same amount, so I got confused, but thank you, that makes sense.
Here is the budget by major fund. The increase in the general fund is primarily due to the raises this year. The decrease in the HERF fund is due to just differences in grants applied for last year versus this year. The same thing with the Local Transportation Assistance Fund, or LTAF fund. Airport fund has increased due to some more capital projects and an increase in revenue. The Capital Improvement Fund has seen a lot of change over the past few years. That's due to back in fiscal year 23, we had the Schneider Electric project budgeted. And then you can see the trend over the next 2 years. We were able to put more capital in the general fund back in fiscal year 24 because of the additional COVID money was still in the budget, and that money is not in the budget anymore. So we've been shifting more capital back into the Capital Improvement Fund. The sewer fund decrease is due to projects being finished. There was a commercial sewer line repair in the budget that is not in there this year, so that's the decrease in the sewer fund. The increase in the refuse fund is primarily due to about a $360,000 increase in vehicle maintenance, a $65,000 increase in fuel, and the rest is the increase in salaries.
Mr. Mayor?
And, yes, sir.
I had a question with respect to the sewer and refuse, that is our enterprise fund. How is that looking for this coming fiscal year?
Mr. Johnson, it's not looking good. I had that same question for Mr. Felix. So we've been spending down the fund balance in the refuse fund and the sewer fund. And so the refuse fund may actually go into the red at the end of fiscal year 24. So David's keeping a close eye on that.
And that will probably, most assuredly result in recommendations for sewer and refuse fund rate increases.
Is that going to come up soon? Is that going to come up soon, or? Okay.
Yes, Mr. Johnson, later
Okay.
this summer. Mr. Mayor McCaw, members of the council, one important point that Victoria brought out regarding the Capital Improvements Fund. It's kind of a little bit of a warning signal to us when we do the budget, when we start seeing that we have to shift capital away from the general fund to the Capital Improvements Fund. So like, projects like the fire project that was moved end up in the Capital Improvements Fund, where we try to do large ticket item projects. So when you start seeing these smaller maintenance type projects or things being shifted over into the Capital Improvements Fund, that's a signal that the general fund is not able to carry those types of projects anymore. So we've seen these trends happen back and forth, but it is a signal that the general fund is experiencing some stress.
And then finally, there's also been a lot of change in that all other funds category, which all other funds is your grants fund, it's CCOM, it's the MPO, it's our development fee fund, health insurance, debt service. And so over the past few years, we had a placeholder for stimulus funds in there that didn't happen. That was just in case. The EMS substation was budgeted out of there. And then we had a $10 million potential broadband grant. So that's why there's been a lot of change in that all other fund line. This is just a picture of how your budget by expenditure type is broken out this year. And that capital cost is as high as it is because of primarily transportation-related grants, which we'll also be going over in more detail, but you already know about for the most part. All right, our revenue summary for this year. So some of the significant changes, the city sales tax, that 3.2% change is actually, we had talked about how we are doing a 2.5% increase over last fiscal year's actuals. That's why the number ended up 3.2 and not 2.5. That 3.2% is actually below where we are currently at this year to date. So it's still what we consider more of a flat revenue projection. The increase in franchise fees is based on actuals for this year. Same with building permits on the licenses and permits line. Local government payments, that's CCOM and contracts. State shared revenue includes your vehicle licensing tax, your sales tax, your urban revenue sharing numbers. Ambulance fees went up due to actuals trending upward. GMC revenues, which is Government Maintenance Center, that is trending up. Those are fuel, parts, and labor. Airport revenues, as we mentioned before, our fuel sales are significantly up, so those are also trending actuals over last year's fuel sales. The decrease in Parks, Rec, and Leisure revenue is primarily due to the Sparks program ending. Parks, Rec, and Library, sorry. The investment income showed, I know, it was my department, sorry. The investment income going up, we do benefit in that area when interest rates are higher. So that's simply a result of the interest rates being what they are currently. The donation line fluctuates a lot. Those are primarily organizational grants and what we're projecting for next year. So those are not federal and state grants, end up in different categories. So an organizational grant would be like Legacy Foundation or Diamondbacks or something like that. So it just changes depending on what we plan to apply for in the upcoming year. The notes payable, that reflects the fire truck that was ordered last year and the 3 ambulances, 2 that we are hopefully going to have delivered this month, and then 1 that was ordered last year, which will be probably another year. And then the carryover line itself, those are the projects that are carried over year to year, capital projects, and that also reflects the fund balance from last year moving to this year. All right, covering debt, we do finance certain capital projects depending on a variety of things such as the type of the project, the cost, the expected life term. Primarily only finance things that have a longer life term. There's 2 types of debt. We use bonds for longer term projects like the Schneider Electric projects we funded through municipal revenue bonds, or lease purchase, which we sometimes use for things like vehicles. Your debt picture for next year is looking rather good. We have no debt currently budgeted either last year or this year out of the general fund or the HERF fund. The refuse fund is carrying some debt from the last truck we purchased, and then the sewer debt is due to the 2018 bond refinance, which I believe is paid off in 2028, David? Okay, 2028. And then the debt service is paying off the Schneider Electric project over the next number of years.
So, and again, Mayor McCaw, members of council, this is this is a good picture here in terms of your debt service obligations, and that was hard won over a long period of time, working these debt numbers down, and they're really coming into play now that we have a tightening budget and revenue picture. So it's good to have low debt during times like these.
Just the overall numbers on how much debt the city is carrying for next year, just over $29.6 million.
And as I recall, that Schneider 2 project, we had a very, very favorable interest rate on that bond, right?
Yes. Yeah. What was the rate, David? 3.3%, something like that. Yeah, wouldn't be able to get that now. So,
No,
and even though, and most of the debt you have on that list that you see is wrapped up in the two Schneider Electric projects, but the beauty of those projects are the savings in terms of energy utility costs and some of the revenue that is gained from some of the, especially like the sports projects and that kind of thing. So it actually helps to pay the debt service on those particular notes.
All right, moving into operations and maintenance for all funds. We're going to go over most of these changes in detail over the next few slides. The two that aren't really covered in the next two slides, the change in the city manager department, that's not just the city manager's office. That's also economic development and tourism, finance, communications are all in there. That significant decrease is primarily due to, we had a placeholder budgeted in the economic development division for an EDA grant for $360,000. So that's most of that decrease. You'll see the other ones in the next couple slides. And the increase in court and legal is also not in the next few slides. That is representative of an increase in outside legal costs that Nathan does not cover due to current claims and potential claims. And then our court agreement for next year, we saw an increase of about $75,000 from last year. Our case numbers ticked up just slightly, and the costs increased as well. So the city manager's division also had a $60,000 decrease. We removed the resource management plan funding that was for the coordinator due to receiving the America the Beautiful grant, which will be paying for her services over the next few years. So that was a really great thing. In IT, unfortunately, Microsoft has changed the way they license their O365 accounts, and so it was a significant increase of $112,000 just for our citywide O365 licenses for next year. Also in software, you see the change that Jennifer mentioned on the fire reporting system, and then couple of decreases. We added OpenGov capital software last year. Part of that was the implementation or setup costs, so it just decreases to its regular annual maintenance cost. And the Blue Ink platform, we were able to get a really good deal for a 3-year service agreement, and so that's why that $15,300 came out of the budget, because we have it for 3 years. In specialized supplies, a little bit of good news. We were on a pretty aggressive PC replacement cycle for the past few years, trying to catch up with things that were out of life cycle that we hadn't been able to replace over the previous years. So Abe tells me we have finally reached the place we should be, and so we were able to decrease that down to just a regular amount each year for PC replacements. Finance also reduced $25,000. That was, we had the entire impact fee updates scheduled last year. We're carrying over some of that, but $25,000 was paid over the past year, so that's why you saw a $25,000 decrease there. We do have an election coming up this year, in case you weren't aware, so we do have to budget for that under city clerk. Marketing and communications, we reduced advertising a little bit to match actuals from this year. That primarily was a reduction in PD recruitment. Not that we are reducing our police department recruitment in any way, but there were some special and significant ad campaigns that were programmed that we don't have to do because things are looking a lot better in PD recruitment, but we are not stopping PD recruitment. Fire had a number of changes. The uniform allowance will be increased due to a couple reasons. There is a small increase to the uniform allowance for our fire department employees, but this is mainly making a change to meet IRS code and bring us into better compliance with the program. It'll be easier to administer, and it's also matching it to the police department's policy. So now we'll have the policy applied the same way across both police and fire departments. $40,000 was decreased from professional services. That was in there to pay for the organizational assessment that will be completed by the end of this fiscal year and this month, so in the next couple weeks. And then we do have an increased cost of both replacement equipment and EMS supplies. In engineering professional services, we increased a small amount. That $5,000 is for the construction inspections needed due to ALLO implementing their services throughout the community. So that's materials testing for like concrete and asphalt and soils and the compaction and so forth. In facilities, so if you recall, there was quite a significant decrease in the public works line. A lot of that was due to projects being completed. So one increase, we do have a typo. It wasn't increased to HVAC services. It was increased to fire suppression services. So I believe that's Climatech. They increased their contractual costs about $30,000 this year. And then we will be doing an electrical assessment of the Ethel Berger Center. Our buildings are getting older. We need to check systems like this. Otherwise, we had substantial decreases in both building maintenance and infrastructure maintenance. Each year, we have a new list of things that need to be maintained. Last year, we did a number of roof repairs and some painting, which has gotten a lot more expensive than it used to be. So different list of things, not that we're not maintaining our buildings. And infrastructure maintenance, we had the Cove pool and tile resurfacing, which was rather significantly expensive. So that's done, so that comes out. Fleet, as everybody else is also seeing increases in fuel costs, so are we. And community development, we increased abatements by $15,000, and that's also a strategic plan goal of city councils to address abatements throughout the community. And it's not on the list, but just so you know, the West Sierra Vista Partnership Program will maintain its funding this year at $85,000. And I believe this year we will spend all of that or even a little more. So. On the Parks, Rec, and Library side, event supplies decreased. There was a decrease due to West End event changes, and then we purchased some supplies in fiscal year 24 that will be used both this year and into the future, so they just came out. Parks, the increase in $20,000 for well maintenance is really just a shifting of costs from Public Works to the Parks Division, who should be responsible for the wells that are in their parks. So we're just shifting that over to the Parks Division. And then infrastructure maintenance, same thing with Public Works and the facilities maintenance. The list changes year to year for what needs to be done. And so like last year, there was a lot of playground sand, there were portable bleachers, there were ADA water fountains, some top dressing for parks, landscaping rocks. That stuff isn't in there this year. There's a different list of things. Sand and ADA water fountains were covered last year, so that's why that decreased. And the Child and Family Division decreases are due to the Sparks program cancellation. On the sports side, professional services increased for tennis and pickleball contract instructor payments, and indoor sports contract payments. So this is good. There's an increase in demand. That increase is completely offset by revenue. Recreation supplies decreased because the Veterans Park Sports Complex was finished last year, and there was money in that budget for equipment for the concession stand in Veterans Park in the sports complex. So we don't need that this year, so that came out. And then specialized supplies changed. Again, different needs year to year. Last year, portable pitching mound and traffic control equipment and sports field fencing were done that don't need to be done this year. On the library side, in professional services, the security contract increased $16,732, and we're just seeing an increase in various office supply costs. This is what your O&M pie chart looks like. Moving into personnel changes for fiscal year 25, we've added an animal control assistant due to the expansion of the Nancy J. Brua Center, which of course is understandable. One graphic designer, our current part-time graphic designer Barry is retiring at the end of the month, and our other part-time graphic designer Zoe has moved into more of a once-a-week assisting status, so we'll be hiring one full-time graphic designer. 2 facility maintenance workers, they will be handling the washer and dryer maintenance on Fort Huachuca since we were awarded that contract. So the revenue from that contract will completely cover the salaries for those 2 new employees. We've added 1 transit driver due to the increase in demand for and ridership of our transit service. And we are funding the 1 unfunded police officer that had been in our budget for some time. That was a previously unfunded position. We will fund that one for this year. Recruitment's been going very well. There's a number of classifications this year, both due to market comparisons and department requests. In the city clerk division, we'll be reclassifying the admin secretary to a department specialist, and also our city clerk position came back rather low on the market survey. Fire had a number of changes. We did market comparisons on all of public safety this year, police and fire. Fire battalion chief will be reclassed up. That's 3 battalion chiefs and the fire marshal. The fire captain also came back low, and the fire paramedic ad pay came back low. That'll be moving from $5,980 to $7,321. Engineers were also unsurprisingly low, so that's a reclassification to bump our civil engineers up. And then in transit, due to some of the difficulty we've been having recruiting part-time drivers, this is just equalizing the part-time transit driver pay to full-time, so they will make the same hourly rate, which is a very small increase. Our retirement contributions for next year, our PSPRS contribution will be $553,278 over last year, for a total contribution of just over $7.5 million. And much of that is due to the change in council policy on budgeting all public safety positions at the maximum rate to really build in an additional payment. So even as our contribution rate is trending down, we're keeping it at the highest rate it was to build in an extra payment. ASRS just has a relatively small increase of $73,715, primarily due to additional positions and raises. This is how your personnel costs break down by fund, and that change is due to the 2% step increase on July 1st. Which will be approximately $460,000, and the 2% market adjustment in January of next year, which is another $254,000, and the couple of additional personnel and reclassifications we just went over. Moving into our capital projects, this hasn't changed, but you haven't seen it for a couple of months, so we will be completing the Animal Control Center expansion in the next few months, hopefully. That was a strategic plan goal. And then we have our police department vehicle purchase for this year. We'll be purchasing 5 Tahoes. We have a number of carryover items due to outfitting. 4 police vehicles are a little bit behind. The VHF radio system is a state grant that we're carrying over. And then we'll be doing a few other grants, PD license plate readers, and then just our general police equipment and police vehicle carryover items. Or sorry, not carryover items for the last 2. Fire department has a new fire truck on the list for next year. And then we are carrying over 3 ambulances, although we do hope to get 2 of those this month, which would be great news. IT, we're continuing to add security cameras at our fire stations, and so Fire Station 1 is up for next year. We have firewalls and servers that need to be replaced. They're end of life. Our Public Works training room, where we hold a number of meetings, will receive an AV upgrade. And then the retractable movie screen at the pavilion is still working for now, but maybe not for long. So. Under facilities, the only major items this year, we've got a couple of cove structural improvements and the water feature replacement, which are getting pretty dingy and not very safe, so we need to replace those. Card scanners, those are the badge readers. We have a few doors in the police station that need to be badged entry. And then the Fire Station 2 bay door modification and parking lot expansion since we purchased the adjacent land this current fiscal year.
Just which water feature are we replacing at the Cove?
The children's water feature in the children's area.
With the mushroom umbrella thing?
The shipwreck. And
Oh, the
hopefully,
shipwreck.
And hopefully the mushroom. We'll see how far we can get. Yes.
Okay. Shoot. Okay. Thank you.
Community development will be moving to Citizen Serve software, which is permitting and a whole lot else. It will be used not just by community development, but also quite a bit engineering. That's also one of your strategic plan goals on simplifying digital access for the community. The special project set aside in the Capital Improvement Fund is a placeholder to be determined at a later date. And that money was from our additional income tax, what we're receiving, which ends this year. So we won't see that additional funding next year. The radio upgrade under CCOM, that's the annual cost. We're on a 10-year contract, so that's the annual cost for the Motorola contract. In parks, we're going to be replacing the large playground at Len Roberts. So the playground, the shade structure, and the tot turf, that's part of your Parks Master Plan and a strategic plan item. A number of carryover items, sheds at Veterans Park to hold equipment, one pickup truck, and then Fab Fry redevelopment. That's the design of the lot at the corner of Fab and Fry. So moving forward on that. The public sewer mainline extension, that is the sewer extension and bathrooms from the OICC down to Domingo Paez. And so we're still planning to pursue that from the State Parks Foundation this year. Roadrunner Park design is underway, and then the first phase of Roadrunner Park construction, that's the number I spoke about at the beginning of the presentation, $764,450 after the allocation changes and personnel numbers were updated. We are also hoping to receive a rebate on our solar covered parking and potentially our EV chargers in the neighborhood of $750,000. So if that money is received, it will also go towards this phase one of Roadrunner Park.
What are we going to get for that $764,000?
We will find out, Mr. Johnson. It's still in design, so we are not sure yet. I think Laura and Wheat are still working on what the final design of the park will look like.
Right, because putting this money in there when we haven't really come up with a design yet is, I know it's a placeholder, but I don't think we'll get much for that money.
Mr. Johnson, I believe you're correct. But when we get the plan, we'll be able to figure out how we can phase development. So hopefully this plus that rebate that Victoria just mentioned can get us a decent phase one start on it. So that's the hope anyway.
But thank you.
We have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Number of things at the airport this year. The spaceport license is in the budget. The feasibility study is underway and expected to wrap up, I believe, later this fall. A mower and a sweeper are needed. NEPA study on the 230 acres, which is a strategic plan item. an automatic weather observation station upgrade, which is something the pilots have been asking for vocally. The master plan update is continuing, so that will be carried over. And then the airport utility installation and the DSIP environmental study and design, that's related to the Defense Community Infrastructure Program grant that is due on Monday that staff will apply for again this year to extend sewer line and internet out to our airport. And then a reconstruction project near the self-serve fuel area. The sewer fund has two carryover projects. One, a grant for the Riverstone Water Conservation Project, and the Lawley sewer line reconstruction across Highway 90. Refuse has a couple of capital projects this year also. A conversion of one of the refuse trucks, and then a improvement to the camera and tracking system on each truck, and then a rebuild of a packer that the truck is still in good shape, and we can rebuild the packer instead of purchasing a whole brand new truck. Our highway user revenue fund projects for next year, the Buffalo Soldier Trail extension at South Route 90 to serve the American Leadership Academy School. Our numbers came back last week, and it looks like that should come in under budget, which is great news. Fry North Garden construction, that's to complete North Garden. However, we are still waiting to hear the results of the RAISE grant, which is also budgeted at the bottom of that list as West End improvements. If we do receive that RAISE grant, that frees up the $4.5 million that we currently have budgeted for North Garden construction. And that money will go towards the, we do need a match for the Buffalo Soldier Trail reconstruction project that Congressman Siscomani put in to reconstruct the entirety of Buffalo Soldier Trail, so some of that money could go towards that. Wilcox Drive was also high on the priority list, and if that money is freed up, though, we will, of course, have another conversation about where that money goes. Then, of course, we'll be doing the Martin Luther King reconstruction project. That is still on the list and should be underway here, I believe, late summer, early fall. Our annual street maintenance. A couple of items that HERF needed, the culvert camera and the Liquid Road buggy. I mentioned the Buffalo Soldier Trail reconstruction phases. We still have phase 1 that we received funding appropriations for last year, and then next year, which will complete the project. Theater Drive was the state appropriation money received last year. That's currently under design. And then West End Improvements, again, is the RAISE grant that we have our fingers and toes crossed that we get.
What's the match if we get the 25 million?
I think it's 5%, Sharon. Do you recall?
Unfortunately, I don't recall off the top of my head on the RAISE grant.
I'm pretty sure it was around 5%, which is about $1.2 million.
Thank you.
Is that annual street maintenance figure of 1.5 sufficient to bring our local streets up to par?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Johnson, 1.5 is consistent with what we've been budgeting the last few years for annual street maintenance. Obviously, as our streets age, the needs increase, but things like the appropriations for BST, that will certainly help a lot in hopefully helping us to increase that number a little bit. And last year we have strategically allocated the majority of that 1.5 to local road reconstruction projects because we know that's important to our community.
Yeah, thank you.
But the short answer is no.
I'm getting all these no's today.
Yeah, it needs to be a bigger number. But the grants, as Sharon says, certainly do help because then we can use other resources for those.
In our LTAF fund, there's no change to this list from what you saw in other presentations. And I'll just reiterate that the 5 projects, the Buffalo Soldier Trail Pathway Connectivity Program, South Route 92 Pathway Connectivity Program, pedestrian walkway design and construction, and the connectivity and safety projects are all FTA grants. And so that's also what those carry over year to year until we're able to implement those. Everything else, the federal portion of those projects is 80% and the city pays 20%. Your future issues remain the same, maintaining the class comp plan as we shared earlier this year. Raises in the Valley area have been substantially more this year than what we were able to do. So we keep a close eye on what the rest of the state is doing. Public safety retirements will always remain a concern, but we are budgeting a significant amount of money towards those year to year. Street maintenance, we just discussed. Impact on local revenue from state actions. We still have no word on the budget, as you are also all well aware, although the league update this morning said that there's been a lot of discussion between the governor's office and the legislature, and they are hoping, since both houses are back in session this Wednesday, with also meetings scheduled Thursday and Friday, that we may see some news on the budget starting this week. So we're very much hoping on that, and also that action doesn't come with any revenue being taken away from cities and towns. Related to that, the census continues to impact our local revenue. Even though Sierra Vista grows a very small amount year to year, we don't grow at the same rate as the cities in the valley. So the pie is only as big as the pie is going to be, and our portion shrinks as the others grow faster. So we continue to see that kind of impact on our local revenue as well. And we've been mentioning the need to increase sewer and refuse rates, so that is a discussion that will be upcoming this year. And again, just the economy in general and how that is affecting our local economy. So your upcoming budget meeting list is getting much shorter. On June 27th, you will vote on the tentative budget adoption, followed by your public hearing on the property tax levy and the final budget adoption on July 25th. And your final budget action this year will be on August 8th with the tax levy adoption. And with that, your budget presentation is done for this year, and we're open to any further questions.
Yeah.
I had asked my questions in our budget meeting. So, council, do you have any questions? Comments?
I think you did well with what we have to work with this year. It's getting trickier, and this is compared to Chuck, this isn't very veteran, but this is my 6th time doing this, and I'm still in awe how you make it happen, like how you make it all work. So just thank you for all your hard work and putting it together and finding the new avenues to make up for the way that we're losing money through the state. That's and so we don't have to do anything we don't want to do when it comes to taxes. Yeah.
And thank you for being conservative.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we were just discussing, David handed out last month's sales tax report to me just before the meeting, and again, revenues are running flat for the month, which isn't a surprise during this time of year. So, but we're now, working on a half year of pretty flat revenues. Fortunately, last year we budgeted very conservatively for sales tax revenues, so we're still running ahead of that. And as Victoria mentioned, it looks like we have a very conservative number programmed in for next year. So it's just something that we'll just have to keep an eye on and make sure that, if it starts falling underneath that, we'll probably have to take some actions. And of course, we'll let you know if that isn't the case. Fingers crossed that won't happen. But right now, it's been flat for a while, so there's a definite trend established now in terms of what's going on.
Yeah, one more thing. Do we know when to expect, when we're finding out about the rebate? And I know, I can't remember when the RAISE grant, we would find out about that.
The RAISE grant we thought would be announced in May, so we're waiting pretty much any day now to hear about the RAISE grant. The rebate, we're working through the registration and application process, so I don't have a timeline yet to hear about that.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's it. That's all I
That's
have.
it. Yes, ma'am. Anything else? Sir?
Yep, just one last thing, your staff is very good about, following up and finding these grant funds, which really helps our budget and our projects. And I put them up against anybody in the state. They're really good at it. So we'll continue to search for those opportunities, and we're always prepared for the opportunity when it comes as well, which helps. So we'll continue to do that in hopes of meeting your strategic plan goals. And we appreciate all the meetings you sat through so far this year on the budget. So it's nice to see it coming to a close. So we appreciate you.
And hopefully we can anticipate something from the state. Hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully June 30th will pass without bad news.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, thank
Staff.
you, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
Appreciate it. If there's any other questions, consider we are adjourned.